What if your younger self could still reach you? A forgotten call carrying choices you never made, and a memory that refuses to fade.
The Glitch Files.
I used to believe the past was a fixed thing, a riverbed carved once and for all, no matter how much the water rushed or slowed. But then the phone began to ring. Not just any phone, an old landline, the kind with a soft plastic receiver and a spiral cord that stretched and twisted like memory itself. I didn't even own a landline anymore, and yet every few nights, when the air grew quiet enough to hear the faint hum of the streetlights, I would hear it, the bell tone, ringing as if it were lodged inside my walls, or perhaps inside my chest. The first time I thought it was a dream. I lifted the receiver and pressed it to my ear, expecting static. But instead, I heard a voice. My voice, only thinner, quicker, bright with a youth I had long since left behind. "Hello?" she asked, hesitant. "Is this me?" I didn't know what to say. I thought about hanging up. Instead, I whispered back, "Yes." The sound of her breathing trembled through the line, rapid and eager, as if she had been waiting for years to confirm something only half believed. And maybe she had. Maybe I had. That was the beginning. At first, the calls were simple. She would ask questions, and I would give her answers. Should she keep the sketchbook hidden under her bed? Yes. Should she trust the friend who laughed at her secret dreams? No. Should she take the long way home, past the willow trees, even though it meant arriving late? Absolutely. The conversations felt like nothing more than echoes, like talking to an old diary or some faint memory playing itself back to me. I thought it was harmless. I thought it was safe. But then the world began to shift. It wasn't dramatic, not at first. Small changes appeared like brushstrokes on a canvas I swore had already dried. A photograph on the shelf now held faces I didn't recognize, smiling at me as though we'd spent summers together. A letter arrived in the mail, written in handwriting that was mine, but unfamiliar, referencing choices I had no memory of making. And sometimes, when I passed a mirror, I caught the faintest impression of a self I had never been. Hair a little shorter, smile a little less weary, eyes carrying a brightness that felt both alien and longed for. I told myself it was imagination, that memory is elastic and nostalgia plays tricks. But when the phone rang again, the younger me didn't sound like a stranger anymore. She sounded determined. "I did it," she said, almost breathless. I listened. I told him no this time. And guess what? Everything feels different. I think I can change more. What else should I change? The question pressed against my chest, heavy and sweet. What else should she change? I should have told her to stop, that tampering with memory is a fragile thing, like pulling threads from an old tapestry. But instead, I thought of my regrets, and I began to list them. The nights I wished I had spoken, the mornings I wished I had stayed silent, the choices I would have made if only I'd been braver. and she listened. Every word. The world bloomed and bent around me, petals opening to reveal countless variations of my life. I saw versions of myself unfold like mirrors catching sunlight, ones who laughed with strangers, who traveled, who loved differently, who stood still when I once ran, or walked away when I once stayed. It was dizzying and beautiful and terrifying. Sometimes the calls felt almost tender. My younger self would hum little songs into the receiver, songs I hadn't thought about in decades. She would describe the way her hands shook before writing letters, or how she carved initials into the hidden underside of a desk, proof that she had been there. But other times the voice carried something stranger, a tone that wasn't quite mine anymore, low and certain, as if another presence had begun to seep into the cracks between us. She said, "Don't worry, I know what to do now. You don't need to guide me anymore." And then the line went dead. After that, I stopped sleeping well. The phone rang less often, but when it did, I never knew who would be on the other end. My younger self, or something else, wearing her voice. Meanwhile, the world around me grew unstable. Once I looked out my window and saw the city skyline bent at impossible angles, towers leaning like reeds in the wind. The next morning, it was gone. The buildings straight and steady again, but the river that should have been there had vanished. On another day, I woke to find the sky flickering like a faulty screen, as if the world itself were trying to decide which version of reality to hold on to. Through it all, the phone waited. Quiet. Still. And I waited too, for it to ring again. The silence between the calls became its own kind of wait. I would sit in my apartment with the receiver cradled loosely in my hands, listening to the faint hum of the empty line, as if the phone were a seashell and I might hear the ocean of my other selves hidden inside. The world kept changing, softly but insistently. Familiar streets would rearrange themselves overnight, lined with shops I half remembered visiting, owned by people who greeted me by name. Their warmth carried a strange ache because I could not remember the bonds they insisted we shared. I would nod and smile, a guest in the life I supposedly lived. Even my own body betrayed me. Some mornings I found scars I didn't remember earning, silver arcs across skin that felt suddenly older, or maybe younger than it had the day before. Once, I looked down at my hands and swore the lines in my palms had shifted, as though the future they mapped had been rewritten while I slept. I tried to write things down, keep track of what was real, but even the pages of my notebooks betrayed me. Some mornings, the words would reorder themselves, describing decisions I never made, places I'd never been. In neat black ink, written in my own hand, the story of another self unfolded, one who laughed more freely, who forgave more quickly, who lived as if she believed the world would last. It was almost a comfort to read about her, Almost. Then one night, the phone rang again. I lifted it slowly, afraid of who or what I might hear. Her voice spilled through the line, bright and trembling. "I fixed it. Do you feel it? It's better now, isn't it?" I didn't answer right away. I was staring at the framed photo on the wall. 3 faces smiling under a willow tree. 2 I recognized as myself, older and younger, overlapping in a way that made my head throb. The third was a stranger, a man whose hand rested on my shoulder as if it belonged there. "Who is he?" I whispered into the receiver. A pause, then her voice uncertain. "You don't know?" "No," I said, too quickly. Silence stretched long enough that I thought she'd gone. Then, softly, Maybe you weren't supposed to." The line went dead. I stood in the quiet room for a long time, the photo still in my hands. I wanted to cry, but the tears refused to come. It felt like mourning something I'd never had. The days that followed blurred together. Sometimes I woke in worlds filled with abundance, where laughter seemed to cling to the air like pollen. Other mornings, the world was gray, stripped bare, as if all color had been drained from it. Through every shift, I felt less like a participant in my own life and more like a traveler passing through borrowed rooms. Yet still, I longed for the phone to ring. When it finally did, her voice was softer, steadier, but no longer innocent. There was an edge to it now, a sharpness shaped by choices she had made without me. "You told me once that you wished you had left earlier, before the storm, before the shouting, before the silence. So I did. I walked away this time. It changed everything." Her words echoed through me. The memory she spoke of was sharp and unhealed, a moment I had carried like a stone. I had whispered to her once in one of our earliest calls to be brave enough to leave, and now she had. But instead of relief, I felt hollow. "What happens to me?" I asked quietly. "When you change it?" She hesitated. Her breath trembled through the line. "You shift. You become something else. But you're still here, aren't you?" I looked around at the walls, at the photo frames, at the notebooks stacked neatly on the table. The world shimmered faintly, as if it might collapse if I looked too closely. "Yes," I said finally, "I'm still here." After that, the calls became less frequent but more decisive. Each time she spoke with greater certainty. She wasn't asking me what to do anymore. She was telling me what she had done. And each time I felt the ground shift beneath me, subtle but undeniable. There were mornings when I woke with sunlight streaming through windows that had never been part of this apartment. There were evenings when the air outside smelled of salt, though the sea had always been hours away. And then there were nights when the world felt fragile, as though one wrong word might cause it to shatter. It was during one of those nights that the phone rang with an urgency that pulled me from restless sleep. I answered without hesitation. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "I think I went too far this time." The silence between us was heavy. I wanted to tell her it was fine, that we could fix it, that the world could bend again. But instead, I asked, "What did you change?" A shaky breath. I said yes to everything, every chance I ever said no to before. I said yes, but now it doesn't feel like my life anymore. It feels like I'm watching someone else live it. Her confession was my mirror, because that was exactly how I felt, like a ghost haunting the edges of 1,000 possible selves. Maybe that's what we've become, watchers, shadows of all the lives we might have lived. The line crackled faintly. For a moment, I thought she was crying, but when she spoke again, her voice was steady, almost calm. If that's true, then maybe it doesn't matter which life we choose. Maybe all of them are real. Maybe none of them are. And then she laughed softly, a sound so much like my own once was that it ached to hear it. When the line went silent again, I held the receiver to my ear long after the dial tone faded, as if I could still hear her breathing. That night, I dreamed of a world unraveling like a thread, countless strands stretching into the dark, some tangled, some broke, but others wove themselves into new patterns, shimmering tapestries of lives I both recognized and didn't. And at the center of it all, the phone rang endlessly. I woke with the sound still echoing in my chest. The days no longer felt like days. They were layers, thin, translucent, stacked atop one another, some aligned, others drifting slightly apart. I could sense them shifting as I moved, like walking across panes of glass. If I turned my head too quickly, I sometimes caught glimpses of the other versions, a different sky, a stranger's voice calling my name, a city street curving into places I had never walked. The phone grew heavier with each ring, as though it carried not only her voice, but the weight of entire worlds. One night, when the air was thick with the scent of rain that never fell, the call came again. I answered with a trembling hand. Her voice was quiet, but clear. "I think I've been undoing you." The words cut through me with a strange calm. I didn't ask her what she meant. I already knew. Each change she made unraveled another version of me, weaving in someone else instead. And yet, here I still was, suspended between them all, a witness to the shifting mosaic. "What happens," I asked, "when there's nothing left of me to undo?" There was a pause. Then she said, almost gently, "Maybe that's the point. Maybe we're not meant to last." I closed my eyes and listened to her breathing. It was steady, almost soothing, like a lullaby from another room. "Do you regret it?" Her reply came after a long silence. "Sometimes. But then I hear your voice and I think, maybe this is the only way we get to know each other, by rewriting ourselves until we finally meet in the middle." The thought ached in me, sharp and sweet. Could that be true? That these endless changes were not erasures, but bridges, that she and I were not undoing each other, but trying to become something whole. I wanted to believe it, but then the world began to fracture. It started with small things. Reflections in glass no longer matching the movement of my body, clocks that ticked backward, shadows stretching in directions their objects never moved. But soon, the fractures grew. Streets split into overlapping paths, each leading to places both familiar and impossibly strange. Voices doubled in conversations, as if people were speaking in two timelines at once. And above it all, the sky itself began to waver, flickering like the surface of water, as though something vast and unseen pressed against it from the other side. I began to dread the phone ringing, not because of her voice, but because of what might come with it. When it finally did, the sound echoed deeper than ever before, reverberating through the walls, through my chest, through every version of me. I picked it up, and for a long moment, there was nothing but static. Then, layered beneath the noise, her voice emerged. But it wasn't just hers anymore. It was hundreds, thousands, all variations of her, of me, speaking together in a chorus, some soft, some sharp, some laughing, some crying, a tide of selves collapsing into the same line. "We've gone too far," they whispered, in perfect unison. I gripped the receiver until my knuckles burned. What do we do? The voices overlapped, some urgent, some resigned. Fragments of answers tumbled over one another. Let it end. Hold on tighter. Choose one. Choose none. Stay. Go. Forget. The noise swelled until it felt like it would split me open. And then suddenly all fell silent but one. Her voice. My younger self. Small, trembling, but distinct. "I don't want to disappear," she said. Neither did I. "I thought I was helping you. I thought if I fixed the things you regretted, you'd feel lighter, happier. But now, I don't even know if I'm still me." I pressed the receiver closer, as if I could bridge the impossible distance between us. "You are," I said firmly, though my voice shook. "You're me. You always will be. No matter how many changes we make, you're still the beginning of everything I am." For a moment, there was only her breathing, ragged and real. Then she said, "If that's true, then maybe I should stop calling." The words hollowed me out. "Don't. Please, I don't want the silence." "But if I stop, maybe you'll finally settle. Maybe you'll be allowed to stay." The thought terrified me. Staying meant finality. No more shifts. No more glimpses of what might have been. But it also meant peace. It meant rest. Her voice broke softly. "Tell me what to do." I couldn't answer. My throat ached with the weight of all my unsaid words, all my
unlived lives. Finally, I closed my eyes and said the only truth I knew. Whatever happens, I'll remember you. The line crackled once, twice, then went dead. And this time, it didn't ring again. The world around me steadied, but not in the way I expected. It wasn't one version or another, it was fragments of all of them, layered imperfectly, like a collage half finished. A photo of a stranger who felt like family, a scar that faded each morning but returned each night, a street corner that led to two different places depending on which foot I stepped with first. I lived inside a mosaic of myself, stitched together from every choice she and I had ever made. And in the quiet, I realized something. The world didn't need to be whole. Neither did I. But the silence of the phone was unbearable.
The silence stretched on for days, then weeks. I kept the phone on the table beside my bed, the receiver resting in its cradle like a seashell pressed against the shore. I would glance at it in the middle of the night, half expecting it to glow, half expecting to hear the bell tone break the quiet, but it never did. At first, I thought the absence meant it was over, that my younger self had finally chosen to stop, to release us both from the endless shifting. And in a way, she had. The world no longer fractured violently, no longer flickered like a faulty reel of film. Instead, it breathed around me, steady and strange, a quilt sewn from dozens of half-familiar fabrics. My apartment remained, but with windows that opened onto streets I had walked once in memory, and once only in dreams. Photographs still shifted sometimes, but more gently now, like leaves turning in the wind. Some mornings the faces changed, some mornings they didn't, but I learned not to cling to them. Each one felt true, even if I couldn't trace the path that made it so. I began to live as though every version of me were folded into this one. The woman who had said yes, the woman who had said no, the one who had walked away, the one who stayed, each left behind a trace, and those traces became my days. It wasn't regret anymore. It was fullness. Sometimes, when the world grew quiet enough, I still thought I could hear her, not through the phone, but in the rustle of trees outside the window, in the way light spilled across the floorboards, in the laughter of strangers passing by. The younger me, lingering, not as a ghost, but as a root still nourishing the branches above. I often wondered what became of her. Did she settle in one timeline? Did she vanish when she stopped calling? Or did she too carry fragments of me, living in a world stitched from our shared voices? The answer never came, but the not knowing became its own kind of peace.
One evening, while walking home through streets that glowed faintly golden, as if sunset had stretched itself into hours, I found myself at a park I didn't remember existing. Children played near a fountain shaped like a spiral shell, their laughter ringing clear. I sat on a bench and closed my eyes, listening. For a moment, the sound of the fountain softened into static. For a moment, the laughter echoed like voices doubled across timelines. And I could swear I heard her, my younger self, humming one of the old songs she used to whisper into the phone. I smiled, because even if the calls had ended, even if the phone never rang again, I understood now. She was never gone. None of them were. Every version of her, of me, of the lives we spun and unspun, they all lingered here, like threads woven into the fabric of the world. And perhaps that was the quiet gift of endings. Not erasure, but proof. Proof that we had lived, that we had loved, that we had tried. That even when the world cracked and shifted, something always remained. That night, back in my apartment, I placed the phone in a drawer, not to forget it, but to let it rest, to let myself rest. The silence no longer frightened me. It felt like space, like breath, like possibility. As I drifted into sleep, I dreamed of petals carried by the wind, scattering and returning, scattering and returning. Each petal its own story, its own world. And I realized I didn't need to gather them anymore. It was enough to watch them bloom and fall again and again. When I woke in the morning, the world was quiet but not empty. The air hummed with presence, as though countless lives overlapped gently, harmonizing instead of colliding. I stood at the window and let the light wash over me. And though the phone never rang again, I carried the sound of her voice with me, not as a burden, not as regret, but as a reminder that even in endings there is wonder. Even in silence, there is proof of life. I whispered into the morning, not expecting an answer, "I remember you." And for a fleeting moment, in the stillness between heartbeats, I thought I heard the echo of her reply. Sometimes the past doesn't stay silent. Sometimes it calls, softly, through static, reminding us of the lives we almost lived.
Disclaimer: all stories shared on this channel are entirely fictional. They are created to inspire imagination, reflection, and thoughtful dialogue about the future, our relationships, and the human experience.
Glitch recorded. Returning to standby.